And the other thing I'd like to mention about frequency work is it's not necessarily direct, meaning people think, okay, when I do frequency work, the pain will stop. It can be that. It can also be that when you release the distortion patterns, the pain will be there, but then all of a sudden, someone introduces you to this new therapy that's not been tested very much, but it's really, really successful in people who are just like you. And you happen to know that this person has set up a practice just in your town, and it's really hard to get this treatment anywhere else, for example. And you go in, and that's the thing that removes the pain or the trauma. Yeah. Do you see what I'm saying? So it's not necessarily direct in the sense of like, frequency work, release the pain, but it can lead you to things or the opportunities or the people or the timing or the remedies or whatnot that will resolve the physical issue. Yep. So an example of this would be something like this. So my sister was running just a few weeks ago actually, and she was running up the hill and she was running close to dusk. So it's really hard to see at that time of night because light's getting a little bit weird. And she's very, very athletic and extremely mobile, like she's extremely like body aware, let's put it that way. But what happened was somebody was coming out of a gate, a car was coming out of a gate, and she, for a second, her attention got diverted to the car, and she ended up tripping. And in that trip, because it was dark out, the car was coming, she was confused by the lights, distracted by the car, her hands didn't go out in front of her. So this is somebody who's extremely physically able, her hands did not go out in front of her, and she ended up smashing her chin on the concrete twice. And she actually ended up splitting open this part of her chin, which is really scary. Yeah. So luckily she didn't bite her tongue and she didn't break any teeth or anything, but she had this huge cut in her chin and she had scraped up her hands and her knees, and she was also feeling like an idiot because she like wiped out over seemingly nothing, right? There's a lot of, oftentimes when we fall, we're often very embarrassed because we don't want to seem like an idiot in front of anybody else, right? And so that's why even like on black ice, for example, in winter, people will try to catch themselves before they fall because they don't want to seem like they've wiped out in front of all these people and everyone's going to say, are you okay? So there's all this other frequency about shame and guilt and judgment, okay? That gets bound up in there too when there's trauma, yeah? So anyway, she falls, she feels like an idiot. She comes home, she calls me to tell me, okay, we had these plans, but I can't go, I have to go get stitches. I'm like, okay. So she's gushing blood all over the place. So her husband goes to take her to a clinic. So I immediately start working on her. So I don't need her physically near me to work on her, as you know, like I work in the Timeless. So I start to work on her. I'm removing all these patterns, right? The shame, the judgment. She hasn't told me anything. They're just showing up. So I'm pulling all this out. And then I start pulling out the trauma out of the body. Just the frequency of trauma, the pain of it, all that stuff where the body binds to it because it's, right? Because it's like in this fear, because it's tensed up, because it's had this trauma happen to it. Of course it's intense. It's not like relaxed. So anyway, so this is how frequency work can work. It's not linear. We have to remember this is not the linear reality. So she gets to the clinic. And when she gets there, she happens to see a nurse who had received training the previous day on how to add these special strips and this glue to close these big wounds without having to use stitches. Before, she would have had stitches on her face. Okay, she's a woman, so obviously for a woman to have stitches on her face, it's not awesome. Okay, especially it might be scarring and whatever, right? So there's all that stuff. And then the other thing was, so this woman had received this clinic the day before, and just before my sister arrived at the clinic, she had tested out or practiced her skill set on a skateboarder who had also split open something or other, doing something or other. So she'd gotten to practice on that person before my sister rolled in with this chin that had been split open from hitting the concrete. Okay, so she was like, oh, this is perfect. I just had the clinic, I've just practiced. Here, I'll just do this thing I've just learned. So my sister didn't have to get stitches. It healed up great. I gave her these Chinese herbs. She has this tiny little line. It's not like you can barely see the scar. So what happened there? Now, can I prove by any stretch that the frequency work did that? No. But I do know that something happened that this coincidence lined up so she didn't have to get stitches and all this sort of stuff. Right?
Wow.
Wow. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, that's a fantastic story.
Yeah.
So when you talk about trauma in the physical body, that's exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
The frequency and everything that was connected to that chin and just her and just guilt and shame and
feeling like an idiot.
embarrassment
And feeling like an idiot.